What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and by crom, it's time for story time. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a side project, like we did with when Tony was on, and I did those sort of like the films, books together. It was a little bit of a thing. We're doing a Conan one now, and we're going to cover a series of Conan stories. And I'm joined by, for the first one, the Elephant in the Tower, or the Tower and the Elephant, Matthew Lloyd. Matt, how are you doing? You good?
I'm good. It's a good day. I'm off work today. It's been a pretty good week.
Nice.
It started out kind of cool this week here, and then it jumped back to being hot like the summer again the past couple of days. But we're good. We're good.
It's that time of year, mate. It's that time of year, isn't it?
It is. It's like you can feel fall. You kind of want fall to come, and you want it to have just a little bit cooler nip in the air, but it's just not there yet. It'll come. It'll come soon enough.
No, we definitely had the same. I went out this morning. I had the hoodie on. Oh yes. By lunchtime, just out in a t-shirt. I'm like, oh yeah. It is still summer technically. Yes, but today I put this out. The whole list of the stories. I've got my complete Conan Chronicles from Robbie Howard. It's a lovely edition. I'm not sure who did it, but it's a wonderful sort of collection. Yeah, and you've got some of the paperbacks.
This is an old paperback that from the series that
very nice.
L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter put together back in the 60s, but this is a version that's a little bit later. But that's what I knew as a kid and young man that I always saw in the bookstores was this series with the Frazetta covers.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's the one that this has got a wonderful pencil artist in it who does some good work. But those Frank Frazetta are. I've got like two, I think, in the attic. And I've got Conan the Usurper and Conan does something else, but they were buried away. And so I've had this for a short while. So I want to get into Conan. I want to read some more. And you chose The Tower and the Elephant. But before we get into that, because it is an interesting story, what you've said you've got the original, or some of the sort of the paperback editions, which are beautiful. You're also joined on the podcast by, you have with you another sort of, I was going to say relics. Amigo Conan the Barbarian, which is awesome.
Yes.
Full hair, full loincloth and big axe. It's awesome. It's fantastic. So, but what's your sort of experience then and sort of history with Conan the Barbarian?
I associate Conan with my childhood pretty strongly. And I tried to put an answer for this together because I was hoping we would have this kind of question to start with. And there are certain things about growing up in the 70s that really strike me as that's very much of my childhood in the 70s. And whether or not I was really into it, slightly into it, it's just one of those things that it just feels emblematic of my experience. When I was talking to Spider Dan about a month ago, I had the same thing to say about Marvel of the Kree. For whatever reason, that version of Captain Marvel, there was something about him amongst the friend group that read comics at the time. And I'm talking like, I was like, 6, 7, 8 years old. I was, I'm a little boy. But that's the same time I first found out about Conan. But for something reason about Marvel was like that. And there's something I think about Conan that's very intriguing and how different from the other comics on the rack. And I'm sure that's the first place I discovered him was through the comics on the rack, Superman, Batman, Captain America, Spider-Man, Thor, getting a little bit closer, but then this isn't a superhero at all. He seems like he's got to have super strength. Come on. He's he may not be, superhuman, but he certainly seems like it. He seems like he's, you know,
It's like Cap, isn't it? Like peak of
yeah,
physical
yeah,
performance
yeah,
kind of thing.
and he seems like he's got some kind of invulnerability,
Mm.
or he's not. He gets hurt at times.
Mm.
He bleeds. He's not, just but a scratch. He gets hurt, um, but he's such a different kind of character because he's not a straightforward hero.
Mm.
From his look and his world, um, he's not a straightforward hero. But some of the comics of my first introduction, and quite honestly, the Mego figure I held up, I've had that since I was like 8 or 9 years old. That's an original from my childhood. Actually, it might be like 80, a little bit later, but it's not too much later. It's
Mm.
definitely in that 8, 9, 10 range. I've had it for that long. It's original character, original figure. That's had, a leg repair. You can't see his bionic left hip, that I had to put back together. Um, some of the plastics have broken. I've had to repair a little bit, and the face is doing that Mego graying that those old Migos do of a
Mm.
certain era. But nonetheless, he still looks pretty darn good, and
He does.
he's a really great figure. He's one of Migo's best figures too, because they spent the time to do the hair, make that great axe he's got. He still has a sword. Also, his gold belt and his gauntlets are cool, and he's got the boots. He's got the swashbuckler style boots that Captain America didn't get the same treatment for those. He got straight
Straight up
old
red. Yeah.
regular the Superman style boots, which aren't even 100% correct, but they're technically fishing boots from a different line Mego had, repurposed. But it even looks like the leathery. There's a not really a texture, but it looks like it flows a little bit more than a straight
Mm.
boot. So it's a great figure. And so as a kid, we had a Conan. How did you play with Conan next to Captain America and Spider-Man and Tarzan? There's a Tarzan figure in the Mega line. You could have kind of had a Pulp Hero
Yeah,
crossover.
mix and match.
If I've since made my own custom John Carter figure because I couldn't go without that.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, it's that's probably where I first encountered Conan, and over the years, had some comics here and there. Um, Eventually, as I was older, got the paperback, and I can say I only have this one paperback, just the first one. I got it and then put aside, and finally came back to reading it because in the kids as middle school, we would go to the used bookstore a lot after school on Fridays. My
Mm.
mom would take me and one of my friends, and we would go, and we would find, if we had, I mean, I think at that point I had all the John Carter books, but we found the Carson Venus books by Eddie Grice Burroughs, the Elric books. We were reading those.
Mm.
Michael Moorcock did a Mars series. It was a total, rip off of
Yeah.
John Carter
Yeah.
under the name of Edward P. Bradbury, ripping off another author name, But Conan was one of the books we always saw on the shelf with in those in that fantasy and science fiction section, and it was all those great paperbacks from the late '60s, early '70s with the Frank Frazetta covers that we saw, and then around the same time the Conan movie comes out with Arnold
Mm.
Schwarzenegger. So there he's like right there in your face, and that was what 82, right?
82.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I was 12, and it was rated R, so I didn't get to see it for a number of years. I did get to see Conan the Destroyer when it came out
Mm.
a few years later, but that was PG, so I could see that, and that was okay. So that's how I got introduced to Conan, and over the years I've of course read this paperback, and I've been in and out of the comics at different times, some of the original Marvel stuff, some of the Dark Horse stuff. Marvel got the license back not too long ago,
Yeah.
then they lost it, and then since Titan / Heroic have been doing this new series, I've been reading that and enjoying that. It's really good. The stories are very they capture the right feel exactly, and the art, the different story arcs. It's so far it's one the first 12 issues have been one big story,
Mm.
but with 4 separate arcs, like chapters in a story
Nice.
almost.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's really, and the art is alternating between Roberto de la Torre and Doug Braithwaite, and they're
Wow.
both doing a great job with
Yeah.
it. Sometimes you go, oh, that looks like John Buscema. Oh my gosh, but it's not like it's a ripoff, like, oh, they're just aping that guy. It's really good. It's really enjoyable. And sometimes, you just need a different genre to read, and it's been really good. And they're doing the established sort of Conan magazine also. It's a bi-monthly, and that's been good as well. So, and that has a Solomon Kane story in the back.
Oh, wicked.
Another Howard character.
Yeah, yeah.
By and Patrick Zurcher is doing that one, writing and drawing that one, and that looks really good as well. So that's kind of where I am with Conan. So it's always been around a long time, and it just reminds me of some of those childhood experiences and stuff. But I'm always eager to. It's like now I want to track down these other paperbacks and read them in that order because of the way they were put together. He wrote his stuff in different. I'm sure you'll want to talk about this, but he wrote the stories. Howard wrote the stories out of order. He just wrote stories.
Yeah, as they came up.
Them
Yes.
as he had them, and they were later sort of put into a timeline. And he knew he was writing out of order, and then he went back and developed the world more and all that and stuff. But when the L. Springer Camp put this stuff together, he put all these paperbacks, the stories, in order. Of his chronologically of Conan's life. So
yes,
start at the very beginning. And
I always like Howard's approach, because he put it as, imagine this is sort of like old man Conan is sat down and just telling you stories, and he'd be like, oh yeah, there was this one time when I was young, and then the next one would be like, yeah, 20 years later I was in the forests of wherever, and then I was a pirate, and you're like, what order was this? So I actually do like that. And as you say, you can sort of tell there is clues in the stories. I mean, even the one we're going to talk about, it highlights that his youth. It actually says, like, very youthful. And there are other ones that sort of like describe him as obviously being a little older, or they'll make reference to things that have happened, sort of very short reference to a previous story, and you can go, which doesn't mean you've got to read. They're not dependent on it, but it'll be like, oh, I've been to Zamora, and you go, oh, that comes after that then. Okay, cool. So it's kind of cool how he's done it. I mean, this is the height of, these were all written, late 20s into the 1930s, and Howard obviously met a tragic end, way too soon. But like, you can tell that sort of like these are clearly, like he had some ideas in his head about how this whole world worked. And I find that sort of kind of fascinating, sort of in him. If you've ever read, I've only read a couple, but there's a correspondences between him and like Lovecraft, because they were obviously writing and sort of connected at the same time. And there's clearly these ideas where they're both sort of saying like, yeah, there's this bigger piece, and I don't really need to touch on these things, but it's in here. Like, I know
the current comic series has a page or two in the back of text stuff that talks a lot of different historical aspects about not necessarily the creation, but just Howard as a writer, and his correspondence with Lovecraft and what's the other guy? It's like a 3 name. Somebody.
Ashton Smith.
That's it. Thank you. Yeah, that guy, and how they all reference the works and stuff. And I think there's even a reference in this story to a Lovecraft. Yeah. That's a reference. So it's I think, to me, that's one of the things that I think is most fascinating about the world of Conan is the world building that Howard was doing, not just on a micro level, but the macro level of there's this whole age, and he's referencing stuff even further back. What does he call that? It's not lunar. It's something.
Oh, he mentions the Lemurians.
Not the Lemur. There's an age before the before all this, before the Hyborian Age. I can't remember the name. It's in some of the stuff I was just reading it the other day, but and maybe it'll come to me. But anyways, but he has this sense of of history that is fictional, but he's basing it on other myths like Atlantis and Lemuria.
Mm.
And now where we are today, there's been all this discussion over the ensuing 70, 80 years of, or 90 years now, 100 years now. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What year is it? I forgot what year it was. I'm still like in 2000. That if you read certain books, that there's a notion that there may have been a highly advanced civilization.
Oh, the Graham Hancock's kind of theory.
Yes.
The ancient civilization.
Yeah. Have you?
I've read a couple of his books. Yeah, I've read them.
Okay, I have too. I'm not like a nutty flat earther or anything.
No.
But I think there's a lot of insight in there. And coming from a background of art history and some of the stuff he talks about with pyramids and other artistic motifs and stuff that are similar on both sides of the Atlantic, and just different.
There's that site as well, isn't it? Is it Turkey, the Göbekli Tepe?
Good. Yes. Good. I can't say it without looking at it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's just so many, and it just, I don't know. It just, he may not be 100% correct about what he's asserting, but I think he's really on to something, that there is something going on. And it feels like now that Howard's writings sort of connect to this prehistory in a different way now, that there's actually people that's actually talking about it like it's a real thing,
Yes. Oh yeah,
and, because people have gone back and forth on Atlantis over the years, and dismissed it as a pure fiction on Plato's part. But I don't know. To me, the way the whole thing comes about in his story, it's his ancestor Solon that got the story from the Egyptians, and that just seems like a weird thing to, if you're going to create a story, and maybe it's just to try to give it some sort of authenticity. Yeah. So this isn't something I created. This was something that my
passed down to me from
from Solon, from the Egyptians. But the more you look at it, I don't know. I think there's something to it. I really do.
No, I think it's interesting. I am always interested in it. I mean, like you say, it can go off into like nutty areas when you get sort of flat earthers or the large earth and all this other stuff, which is weird. But the Moria, for example, was an idea based around lemurs, and they said, "Oh, there's a sunken continent there." Turns out it's true. They found that there was a whole bunch of land that would have been part of Pangaea that would have sank into the sea or sort of stuff. So it's still, the land is there. So yeah, never know. I agree. I like this idea. One of the things that Howard does, like you say, it's not sort of thrown together. Like the book I've got sort of has a map of
I think they all have a map.
Yeah. It's a Howard written map, but like it has all the the air, not countries so much, because they are the states or areas or regions, aren't they? Yeah. And you've got like Hyperborea, where sort of some area where it's you've got like Vanaheim, Asgard. It throws in all these different laws and sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that you say this is the Hyperborean age, or the Hyborian age. It sort of says, long ago, as it is in the film, which is great. Yeah. But then there's ruins and even sort of references it in this, when there's sort of like, there's ruins. Like, this isn't new. We're not the first. Like, there's been others. And so, I like the fact that it's just a part of history. And I think one of the things I like most about Conan is that he's not, you said about the comparison to like superheroes. Although he is, almost indestructible, he's got hyper senses. He's sort of like, he'll know when something's about to attack and all this kind of stuff. Like he's a superhero kind of character, but not a superhero. But he's also like not a world-saving character. Do you know what I mean? Like, his adventures are his adventures. It's not like, oh, Conan saved the Hyborian age, or he's not like a world saver. It's just like, No, he was a pirate at the time. This is the adventure he went on. Or he was in these forests at one point, fought a dragon, and that's an adventure. And it's like, cool. He's just a barbarian doing stuff that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very street level, to use the term. You know, I mean, it's very grounded in the way that, like, I think a lot of the best Batman stories are grounded in the sense that he's not Batman's not saving the world. He's just a guy with a suit and stuff, and you know, and it's that kind of character. He just is sort of like to the ultimate, you know, physical development, like you said. And it's but that he goes through this world, and so you learn all about this world that he's in. That's so different from ours. He's not in the middle. Conan's not in the Middle Ages, but you feel like there are aspects of his world that feel like they could be from the Middle Ages. You feel like there's bits that could be from the Roman Empire. You feel like there's bits that could be from, you know, the ancient Middle East. Other bits that maybe you can't really quite place. Nordic. There's definitely a Nordic. Teutonic element to the stories as well. And then you've got, I think, the one thing that sets it apart, and as has been stated in some of the literature I've been reading as I prepared for this, is the whole magic element. It's a very different kind of magic element than we see in I don't know, Lord of the Rings or whatever. I feel like the magic that's in this is a very different, and not even just magic, but just the supernatural element. Like, the supernatural world is real, and it's gonna mess with you, you know. So you gotta be careful. It's like a different. Not only have to worry about the bad guys, and it's not even clear, in my opinion, if Conan is a good guy or a bad guy.
Oh no, he's just a guy.
He's just a guy trying to survive in a very dangerous and deadly world, and you have to do what you have to do to survive. And you know, he's a thief sometimes, he's a pirate, and he does things that are seen that you know, normally are, you know, what bad guys do. Thieves, pirates, you know. And it's very different in that way. It's very different than, say, a John Carter or a Tarzan, those kind of pulp heroes who are clearly the good guys and have a, you know, John Carter is a world saver. He saves the world. You know, and Tarzan maybe doesn't save the world, but he certainly saves his region of Africa where he lives.
He has, there's a definite antagonist that sort of.
There's always an interloper that's coming in, it seems, to try and destroy the balance of nature that is there. Because I don't know. I mean, we should talk Tarzan sometime, because I really like Tarzan, and I've read almost all those books, the original books, and I don't know. Some people have bad things to say about Burroughs and Tarzan and stuff, but I don't know. I have a really different view on it. But anyways, Conan is just trying to
we'll get that in the diary, because I wouldn't mind.
With Conan, we're getting some kind of, you know, a guy who's just trying to figure out this world, and it's like, how does he deal with this world that is dangerous and deadly, and there are supernatural elements. Are the gods real, or are they just other things that are misunderstood as gods? Which is something that I think is a theme in the story we're going to talk about eventually. But I think it's really interesting that it's so different, and it does feel unique. I feel like when you read it, you can see how other things were taken from Conan to make something else. You know, I know you read it, and there are elements of this that, you know, certainly were lifted for D&D. As well as, you know, taking elements from Lord of the Rings and stuff. But the whole mystical, supernatural element definitely feels like it's unique to this kind of world.
Yeah, I think two things I think that's important from what you're saying. I think you're right. I love this idea. First, the street level thing. You know, he's just surviving in this rather brutal.
Brutal. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, it's a brutal world. I mean, you know, this is a thing, isn't it? Like,
horribly brutal. Yeah, it's literally a kill or be killed world.
Exactly. That's it. Exactly that. But I think one of the things is that I was just checking the first story published 1932 in Weird Tales.
The Phoenix and the Sword, that one?
That's the one. Yeah, the Phoenix and the
Yeah.
Sword. And what I realized is this is obviously being, Weird Tales. The pulp novels have just been really deep, heavy into sort of like the Shadow and some other bits and pieces. And what you've got to take into context. This is during the Depression. Like, this is after the crash. These are these are like a nickel or a dime. Like, these are really cheap produced. They're designed for cheap entertainment for people. Weird Tales, the Shadow magazine, Doc Savage, all these other things. But one of the things about these characters that's worth noting is, like you said, they are street level and they are kind of ambiguous because you get like heroic figures like Doc Savage. Doc Savage is like that form of morality. Like, he was Superman before Superman, right? He was the light.
Yeah.
He was that sort of moral certainty that you would sort of, people would look to. But also, you wanted these characters that sort of said, do you know what? The world is a crappy place and you do have to survive. And sometimes you have to be morally flexible to survive in that world. It's okay because the world is shitty. And I think that's a real big part of like why these characters became so successful is because these people were going through some times and they were able to say that I can see myself in this character in an almost honorable and heroic way.
Because I mean that's a great point. Because people in the Depression had to they probably had to beg, borrow, and steal to get their families
100%.
through it at times. And
exactly.
It's easy to sit on your house on the hill and look down at people, but when it's between your child starving and you stealing some food from the grocer because you had been out of work for a month, just to get them something to eat, it's I can see it is very relatable.
Well,
in that sense.
Even so, we know that, like, for example, let's take New York, and there were other places as well, but like by 1932, late 32, early 33, that was a shantytown. Like Central Park was populated by shantytowns, and I love that. I'm going to just quickly this is the opening sort of few lines of the story that we're going to talk about, the Tower and the Elephant. It says the torches flared murkily on the revels in the mall, where the thieves and the of the East held carnival by night. In the mall, they could carouse and roar as they liked, for honest people shunned the quarter, and watchmen well paid with stained coins did not interfere with their sport. And there's this idea of where this book takes place, or this story takes place, is a kind of a darker kind of place. But no one in it, when it goes through, it gives some great descriptions. But like, it's kind of like, yeah, this is a dangerous, dark, and dirty place, but there's still life there. And in this is like Conan, and we're going to meet the Prince of Thieves and all this other stuff. So I like that it's kind of like, even when it tells you these sort of places are grim, and it's never like condescending. Do you know what I mean? It's not like going, this is a crap hole, and these people are terrible. It is like
it's not passing judgment on the people because they're there. It's just saying this place is terrible, and he meets, and I guess if you read a few of the stories, that he'll meet different kinds of people over time. He'll meet some people that really are crappy, and are bad people, but then he also meets people that are similar to him, just trying to survive, and live their life.
Yes, no. The other thing I want to say about the magic is, which I completely agree what you're saying. So if you can take the comparison of sort of, let's say, Lord of the Rings, which obviously came several decades later, but there's sort of, and other, I want to say more sanitized, but they may not consider it. But like C.S. Lewis with the the Narnia books, or those kinds of things. The magic in this again is kind of practical, but has a cosmic side to it. But there's no balance to it. Like, when you sort of when you read, like, Narnia or Lord of the Rings, there's always this thing of like, there's the light and the dark and this and that. Here it's like, no, there's magic, and then there's just people that use it.
Yeah.
And those people can be crap or they can be good, and that's just it. Like,
well he does say in this, though, in the Yag Kosha says that that Yara wanted the darker stuff, or no, he said he learned the darker stuff over time. He never had wanted that, but he had learned it because he was exposed to it, and he learned it that way. So there is a sense of it, but I don't do you ever meet a white magic or
No.
it's all it just seems like something that's done, and
Yeah.
it's the people, not the magic.
Exactly.
You
Like
know?
they could stop at any point, but they don't.
Yeah.
Like I think
Yeah.
Howard's view seems to be that like magic. I mean, Howard is clearly working class. I mean, if you've ever known anything about Robert E. Howard, like he was a working class dude. This was his sort of way of living. I get the kind of feeling he didn't like the rich and powerful, because anybody rich and powerful in the the Hibernian age, not a good person. Like they're usually corrupt. They're usually sort of like lording it over people. And it's about sort of like redressing that balance, power to the people kind of thing. So yeah. The other thing I just wanted to quickly note, which I do really like about this, less this story because it's sort of it is quite enclosed, is you have a lot of like side characters as well. And as you sort of said, he'll come across people good and bad. And it'll come into the film, like Valeria,
Mhm.
who Conan's love in the
Yeah.
movie, but like she's only in like one story in the thing. She's in Red Nails, and that's it. And then there's like the Black Queen, who's like
Yeah.
the
Feel it.
pirate queen,
Or
or
Balin.
and Bailey, yeah.
Yeah.
And you get these characters done, and you kind of think, if you wanted to, well, with Red Sonja, I suppose that's what I think happened with Sonja. They go, oh, we're going to go off and do a whole host of like Valeria's adventures.
Mhm.
You could take that character and just go, oh, we're just going to
Yeah.
go off in the world and just do
Yeah.
her adventures. It could be really cool. So, yes, I do like the world of Conan. Right, let's get to the story. So we read The Tower and the Elephant, which is the third story that was released in March 1933. And it's relatively short. It's a short story. They're mostly short stories. But the premise of the story is a young, youthful Conan is in this a city state of Zamoria, or Zamora, and whilst he is in this den of iniquity, sort of he hears about this tower. He's there to scale this tower and steal this jewel known as the heart of the elephant. And everyone says to him, "You can't do that. This is lunacy, follies of youth." But he goes to do it anyway. And whilst doing it, he comes across the Prince of Thieves, who sort of like passes on knowledge of how the thievery is done. And he's a great character. Like he's brilliant. And then when they get in there, but they do get in through a number of means, and he comes across. But we'll talk about the surprise and things, the creature in it. But they come across, and he meets this character that is the head of an elephant and the body of a man, and it's old and blind. And he tells him this tale of how many eons he's been on Earth, and asks basically for death at the end. And Conan does the honourable thing as he leaves, having they've conducted this wager. But there is a greater force that sits beyond all this. I don't think he ever comes back. But yeah, so we'll get into that. So that's really the sort of the gist of the story. So my first question then, Matt, what do you think of it? Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was good. I mean, it's like it just feels like I mean, it's clearly a classic Conan story, but it feels exactly like that. I mean, it has the elements you would expect.
Mm.
And I think that the twist and the surprise in it, though, are things that if you don't read a lot, you forget. Oh yeah, that's part of his world, and it was what makes it different. The magic. It's easy to think of it as lots of swords and fighting and all that stuff, but he has these other skills of stealth and being a thief, and he's a good judge of character too. I think that's one thing about Conan. He's a good judge of character, and he puts a lot of stake in his judgment of others. Like at the beginning, he hears about the whole tower from the other thief, the Kothian thief, and he ends up, killing him because he's not because he's a he doesn't like him, and he's a jerk. And so, so let's get rid of this guy. Whereas I think he really actually likes Taurus, the Prince of Thieves. That when he meets him, I think he likes the. It's like one of those things. It's not really something that says Conan liked him because blah 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 blah, but it's more of a sense where you meet somebody and just in talking to them in a little bit, you get a sense of what they're like. And I think in a kill or be killed world like that, you have to be good at that to survive. And you have to understand that there's one point where he says, he's wary of doing what Taurus asked him to do because he could, betray him, but he does it anyways because he has that sense that, he does it anyway. So he does it, and it's, it ends up bad for Taurus, but,
Yeah, it does. But no, I think that's a really good point. I think one of the things I sort of got from this is that point is Conan's not a thinking character, and that's not to say he's stupid, but he is. He's run on feelings and his experience and his intuition. Like I think that he doesn't try to ponder anything. He's like, as you say, like, no, this Taurus.
Yeah.
I get a good feeling from this. I'm going to be wary. Like I know I could take him if it came to it, but I'm going to trust him.
I was thinking as I was contemplating this stuff that Conan is smart. He is clever. He is insightful. He is open to new ideas, but he's not an intellectual.
No.
He is not an intellectual, and it doesn't mean he's not smart. I think it's important because I was thinking to myself the first time, he's not really smart. I was like, no, that's not true. He is smart. And I had to think, what is he not? He's not an intellectual. He takes things very much at that surface level thing, probably because, I'm going to tie it back to what you were saying about the depression and stuff. For somebody at that time, you couldn't overthink things. You had to worry about what was in front of you. You couldn't think about the great immorality of this, that, or the other thing in order to always survive.
Yes.
You had to, and you might have been smart and you could figure out ways to survive, but you couldn't really afford to get tied up in an existential crisis, and deal with that kind of thing if you wanted to survive.
No, I agree. I think that's a big part
and I
of
think,
Conan, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the way to look at his approach to the world, because he takes everything as it comes. He doesn't go, oh my God, how could that be? It just is, and he accepts it, and he figures out how he's going to kill it or whatever.
Or scale it or steal it.
Yeah. But he's open to listening. He's not necessarily a shoot first and ask questions later either. This story would have ended a lot quicker.
Well,
oh my God, an elf-headed monster, kill it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't move. Well, one of my favorite things you say about him, you mentioned about him being open and learning, and that's what I think there's a big part of this story that demonstrates that young Conan was very much open to new ideas, because he manages to scale the first part of this tower, and they describe this tower as being, basically sort of like glass. Like, this thing is, designed to be almost impossible to climb, and he manages to get over a wall and this other things. And he's going to kill this guard, and then when he comes in, he sees the guard's already been killed. And then he meets Taurus, and Conan says to him, he says, "Well, why have you left him out lying on the path? You're going to be found, and that's it. We should hide them in the hedge." And Taurus is like, "Well, no, because if we're in this and he's not there, then people get concerned and they start to investigate, and we get found. If they find a body, the alarms go up. We're made aware that we've been found out, and we can escape." And Conan's like, "Yeah, all right, yeah, I can't fault that. That makes total sense.
I'll go with that."
Yeah. So you're right. And then what I like, one of the things is, as he sees that Taurus is sort of climbing this thing, that Taurus is doing it barefoot, and again, instantly Conan's like, "Oh, okay." And it says like he slipped off his sandals. And he will then progress through the rest of the story barefoot, and you're like, so you are completely right. Like, he's not. Sometimes I think people they looked cheaper, lesser versions of Conan when he's been presented elsewhere. They do him as like an oafish brute, sort of like, like he's all sword and everything else. But like you said, he's very astute. Like, he's watching the world and he's going like, okay, well, no, I can learn from this person. I don't know this. I will learn. And so I love that fact that he's not just like, as you said, just wielding a sword, hacking, and off it goes. So he is. It's a really good point. Like he's not an intellectual, couldn't be an intellectual, but he's willing to learn and adapt to a situation, which I think is really cool. So anyway, they get up the tower, this bejeweled tower, and I think some of the
Yeah.
descriptions are really cool. The cusp of the things all sort of covered in jewels, and again, like Conan sort of questions and says, Why are we not stealing all of
this.
these?" Yeah. Again, Taurus is something like, well, if we steal the big one, we get the power, and all of this is ours anyway. Like,
Yeah.
think it through, But as you said, there is a moment. Taurus tells him to go look over the edge, keep an eye out. I'm going to do this thing, and then we get the attack from above. We don't actually. Taurus is killed, and he's got some marks in his neck, and then we get a fight scene with a giant spider, which I'm not gonna lie, kind of creeped me out. It was good.
If you think about a giant spider, it's pretty creepy. It is. But I thought it was a cool fight. I mean, it's a story where oddly there's a lot of talking in this story. It's an action adventure kind of story, but there's a lot of talking. I think that's why he started the story with the scene in the tavern where he kills the other guy to sort of set the, like you see in a movie today, you start with an action, like a Bond film starts with a big act to get you going, and then it starts, and that has little or nothing to do with the rest of the story. It can, but it's not, critical, but it gets you going. And I think as a reader, and you start that, and you're looking for, if you just had a bunch of talking to start with, you might be like, are they going to happen? But you get this, and then you get the impetus for why he's going after this thing in the tower. But yeah, no, it's a neat sound. One of the things about some of the action and the suspense that I think Howard does well, and I don't know if it's because it just struck me as I was reading it, or I can't compare it to anything specific, but I felt like he used sound really well. Like there were times when there was a sound that was important, and the one that strikes out to me was the sound of the spider's mouth, how he described that. And it was just kind of like, oh yeah, that'd be kind of creepy. That'd be nasty to hear that, and just some of the other times sound plays a role in the story, when it's the sound of the lions quieting, or he thinks at one point he's being quiet, but then he's not quiet enough because Taurus hears him and turns. And just there's probably a couple other times there's a sound, something where sound jumped out. But that was something I thought was really interesting about the storytelling and his writing style, because it's not a really sparse writing style. It's got a lot of stuff to it. There's a lot of, we talk about the world building, but also on the macro level, but on the micro level, just, you kind of can imagine what these places not just look like, but what they smell like and what they feel like. And it's good. I mean, it's good stuff. It's not, it's pulp fiction, of the era, but it's I don't know, maybe I'm just, easy to please when it comes to that, because so many of my favorite stuff is started out in magazines like that, even including, science fiction like Bradbury, which is, viewed as, real literature. It's still, I think there's a lot more to these. There's a lot more merit to this stuff than probably would have been given at the time. This wasn't F. Scott Fitzgerald. That was
yeah. No, but it was pulp. I mean, that was the idea, wasn't it? It was supposed to be kind of like, and I think this is the thing with a lot of pulp. It gets classed in that fashion, doesn't it, as disposable and some of it
lowbrow, disposable, lowbrow.
Exactly, lowbrow. It's sort of like padded with purple prose and all this other stuff. which I do think is really condescending because you're right. I think there's a tactileness to this. There's a texture to this. Like you mentioned about the lions. There's a great scene where they're sort of coming out and basically it's their eyes in the darkness they get lit up,
Yeah, yeah,
and you're
yeah.
like, oh shit, like, and it feels heavy. Like there's a weight to what they're saying, and you are there. And the same for the spider fight. The fact that it's sort of you've had this thing of being sort of stalked by lions previously. Now you've got this thing, and it says about it sort of like running up the walls. It leaps off the wall at Conan. It's using its webbing to try and capture him and all this other stuff. Like it feels like it's crazy, and
Yeah, yeah.
um, it's a
To me,
it's a wonderful description.
I don't know about you, but when I read it, I can totally visualize it as a movie in my head.
Oh yeah, visual
Either
is very
either
yes.
either individual comic book panels, or like if I was going to draw this story, I can imagine how I would lay it out, and those some of those images
Mm,
and the shots and stuff. But then or like a movie, and it's just, and you can easily see how that would be a really frightening and suspenseful, you know, almost entirely dark,
yeah.
just a little bit scampering, scurrying here or there, a tense Conan, like worried about what's about to jump out at him, and then a jump scare with the spider kind of a thing. And you can totally imagine how that happened. And just, or the lions, you see the bush that's, mostly black and a little bit of greenery, and then the red eyes that he mentions deep set.
Mm.
It's like it's very visual, I guess. It's
Yeah, it's
it's
evocative. It
yeah, it
evokes his
really is.
visual. I agree.
Yeah,
When I read it, I often get a visual in my head, but this is easy to do with this. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I've
yeah.
completely got that visual in my head. Like I'm following the story. Um, so yeah, no, it's great, which really helps when you get to to this sort of last bit to sort of so they have the fight with the spider. Taurus has been killed by said spider, but Conan goes through these big ivory doors. Everything's sort of there, and it's this big silver staircase. He's gone down, and as he goes in, he sees there's a room and there's a marble. He calls it a couch, which feels kind of out of
Yeah.
place, but fine. There's a marble seat, and on it is this grey, sort of weak-looking figure, but it has the head of an elephant and two tusks tipped by golden balls. And Conan assumes it's a statue, and he's kind of
Hmm.
like, "Oh, that's why they call it the Elephant Tower." And that's why it's
Yeah.
called the Heart of the Elephant, like this jewel that they're after. So he's like, "Oh, it's a statue. Cool." He still thinks, and this is what sort of dawned on me as I read this part of the story, is the twist here is this tower. But of all these thieves and all these people in Zamoria, it's been classified as a keep. So all the soldiers are there to keep people out,
Hmm.
to stop people from stealing this jewel. And everyone thinks, oh, it's this the jewel of power that is there to be, the thieves. They're there to stop the thieves from getting in. Yeah, but it's a prison. They're there to stop doing this sort of this figure, um, Yara. I know Yara is the god, but
Yeah.
this figure is there as a prisoner, and these
Yeah.
guards are there to keep him in, and to sort of to give him food and stuff. So it's really kind of tragic. And even Conan sort of says as he sort of this figure sort of starts talking to him in this struggling way, and reaches out with its trunk and stuff. He sort of feels pity for it. He realizes like, oh, this is not something to be cut down with my sword. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's engage it. And it's a really like you're like, oh wow, this is I thought this was a high heist, like a swashbuckling hijinks, and all of a sudden it's taken on this kind of depressing and dark tone. Cool, but like it's kind of surprising. So yeah,
It brings a different it brings in an emotional beat to the story,
mm,
as opposed to just like I said, shoot first and ask questions later, because he is open to those kind of things. It allows him to be more sensitive, not in the way that, he's sensitive like he's going to cry, but he does feel that empathy and that compassion for uh Yog Kosha. That's it,
mm.
Yog Kosha. Yeah.
I think yeah,
You know,
I'm looking for his name. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's different. It's a bit of a surprise. It shows that sort of that nuanced side of Conan that maybe how somebody in the depression would see a fellow traveler on the rails struggling, and you know what I mean, or you might see somebody you thought was dangerous and you had to watch out for them. Then you actually realize they're not really dangerous.
Mm.
They're in the same boat as you essentially, but they're actually worse off because
Yes.
Conan has his freedom. He's doing what he wants to do, but this guy is in prisoner, and it sounded like he was. I couldn't tell if he was supposed to be mutilated or what, but like his description of his limbs sound like he doesn't have limbs anymore to use.
Yeah,
That was
it
my
sounds like he's kind of emaciated, isn't it? Hasn't really been fed.
yeah
He's lost. He's very sort of thin. Because he also suggests at, at one point that when he arrived, because he says eons ago I came to your planet with there
yeah
was a bunch of us.
yeah
They had wings,
yeah
and so it's like, oh, they are long gone, and like we don't know if they were chopped off or they were sort of fell away or whatever. So yeah, you do get the feeling of like the head is too large for the body to carry. So there is an element of I do think Yara put some kind of magic on and you're right, it's Yag Kosha. So they're named for their planets. They're from the planet Yag. Um but yeah, there's something on there. Like he can't move. He's blind. He can barely sit up. Um and he tells this story of like I've seen empires rise and fall, and I've seen these lands come and this and that, and yet I'm here. And he then tells the story of Yara, who once sat at his feet to learn of the magics, and then, as you say, sort of went to the dark, got to the darker. But there is one magic, and there's one thing left. That's why he won't let him die, because there's this one thing he wants to learn, or he wants to know. Um, and so Yag Kosha sort of says to Conan, I will grant you one thing if you kill me. Cut out my heart and squeeze the blood into the heart of the elephant, the jewel, and then take that to Yara. And he's like, Conan's like,
okay
okay, yeah, cool, I'll go with that.
yeah
Um, and again, like you said, he takes things in his stride, doesn't he? Like he's very cool with all this stuff. He's just like,
well,
okay,
well I imagine him he's like he like we said, he's young at this point.
mm-hmm.
He's trying to get on the best he can with what he does know and what he has at his disposal, and he's encountering something that is completely not just literally alien, but he doesn't have a foot in this magic world at all. Like he has no foothold at all, and
No,
he just kind of has to, like we said, do what he has to do to survive. And this is his way out of the tower easily, because he's going to take care. There's the guards, Yara, and all that. He can get out, and that's now that he's realized. I guess he's not going to get some kind of jewel.
mm.
It's a whole different thing that he didn't sign up for all this.
Yeah,
But he doesn't make a big deal about it, like we said earlier. He just goes. He realizes I have to do something else now. Excuse me, to make it through.
yeah,
And he does it.
yeah. But there's a kind of like an honor to Conan as well, isn't there? Like
Yeah.
he hears this story, and and Yag Kosha is like giving him giving him a deal. So like, I will give you this thing, but here's what I want from you. And because we know that Conan does not really sort of shy away from death, he's like, yeah, that's within my
Yeah.
wheelhouse. That's within my gift. I can do this thing. But also, what you're asking me to do is to take this jewel as a sort of like a one last thing. He gets it's almost like a revenge thing. Like he's enabling Yag Kosha's revenge on Yara. So he's like, there's an honor to it. It's like, I've heard your story, I feel your pain, I will carry out your wish.
He has that. He feels his pain, like you said. He has that empathy, and he's touched. He's touched, and he's like, he feels a sense of justice and honor to help him get that revenge. And I think he probably sees, like Conan's own origins being what's the real origin? Because the movie origin is not right. Um, he's born, since he's supposed to be born on a battlefield or something.
Something like that, I think.
That,
Yeah.
So he's born into all that kind of chaos, and I think he sees that he's kind of stuck in this life, and he sees Yakosha the same way, that he's stuck now and in prison. And the only way for him to help, the only way for Yakosha to get out is, and is to do what he says. And I think he can imagine that if he does this for Yakosha, perhaps someone someday would do the same for him to release him from this struggle. I mean,
Yes.
because I think your point about the depression takes on a yet another relevant point, in that, what is life, the meaning of life? I don't mean to quote Monty Python in a silly way, but a serious way. It's a sad vale of tears. Sometimes,
Yes.
it can be seen like that, and that's kind of the lot that Conan has.
You have to be merciful, and you have to take pity where you can.
Yeah.
Like, you have to show those things. Unfortunately, sometimes it can be brutal doing that, but that's fine.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I think the way it's depicted in this is fantastic. I mean, I will just say so. So there's a whole page and a half of Yagkosha telling his story about where he came from, how Yara became who Yara is, and at no point does Conan say anything. He just sort of stands there and takes it all in and listens. But then it ends with basically he explains to him, I want you to do this thing for me. You have to sort of use your sword, cut out my heart. I want, and then lay this gem before him and say, Yagkosha gives you a last gift and a last enchantment. Then go you from the tower quickly, fear not, your way shall be made clear. So that's the gift. He's saying, I will let you out the thing. And he basically sort of finishes off, and he says, I will once more be Yoga of Yag, morning crowned and shining, with wings to fly and feet to dance and eyes to see and hands to break. And that's it. That's him talking. He's been talking for a page and a half. And all it says is, uncertainly, Conan approached, and Yagkosha of Yoga, as if, approached, sensing his uncertainty, indicated where he should strike. Conan set his teeth and drove the sword deep. He doesn't even answer. He just sort of does it. He listens, and sort of there's an acknowledgement of like he's raising the sword, and Yagkosha sort of like here, and Conan does it. Like there's no verbal acknowledgement of the story or of the position or anything. Like it's really interesting that Conan's this very stoic figure, but again, that's who he is. I love that characteristic. There's no sort of, as we said before, there's no intellectualizing this. There's no sort of trying to put him out of going like, well, the life is the wonderful thing. He's like, Conan's very much like, no, you want death? All right. I want the gem, so bargain.
I think that's one of the sub themes, or one of the themes of the stories in the world, is that life may be not so great. It is something you just, like we said, he's born on a battlefield, and from there on, his life is a struggle and a fight, a literal battle.
Yeah.
And he has to, there's no easy way. There's no, king handing out, money to him to help him. He's not born that. He is the common person.
Yes.
He is the common person of this age. And that's what it's like, which once again, your point about the depression is becoming more and more salient as we go along. That's what it is. I'm not going to say it's a straight analogy, but I think, like you said, it would, people would get this, to use a more current term, this vibe very well. They would get it. They would totally get that.
Oh, they would definitely,
and connect to it,
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, even to the point of like, from Conan's God,
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact words, but someone sort of, I remember seeing something where he's questioned about why do you worship Crom? Well, Crom is my god, but he's
Yeah.
not a loving or giving god.
Yeah.
Basically, sort of like if I have to sort of ask Crom for help, I failed, and
Yeah.
therefore Crom will sort of look down on me with with displeasure. So it's like even your god will sort of like is not there to help you. The god is there to basically sort of like he's a god of battle and stuff, but like that's the way to live. But if you sort of ask for help, Crom's going to sort of turn his back on you because you're weak.
It's a different kind of God. It's a God that's
Mm,
like you know, you know, quit crying,
yeah,
pull up your pants,
that's it.
and do what you have to do
Yeah,
because that's what the world's like. You
yeah,
know, it's a I guess a smack in the face of reality kind of
yeah.
thing, you know.
Um,
But it's so different from you know,
the Christian
the
God and
Christian
any other,
notion of
yeah.
God and
But even
it's
even like Norse gods and stuff had a sort of there
yeah,
was a giving side to them, but then like, but the Sumerian gods are like, oh no,
yeah.
even more brutal. Um, but anyway, Conan does as he said, he pulls the heart from Yag Kosher and squeezes the blood onto the jewel, but the jewel absorbs the blood
That's a
until it
kind of grisly image, isn't it?
oh, it's
Squeezing the
amazing.
blood out of a
Yeah.
heart and
And then he carries the stone. It's now glowing and there's a mist swirling inside it. And he takes it down these
that's
stairs.
probably one of the reasons that it was seen as uh, lowbrow because it relied on a lot of grisly kind of imagery and it wasn't intellectual. But
Oh, no.
even though the point of the character is something completely divorced from the intellectual side of things, I think you can still intellectualize about the character, which is what we're doing right now.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's there to be. I mean, Howard wasn't thick. I mean, Howard wasn't a stupid guy. Like he knew what he was doing. I mean, of this era, you can read Fitzgerald or Hemingway or something else, and you can sort of talk about that, and you go, yeah, 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 great. But like, Fitzgerald and Hemingway don't give me a barbarian squeezing an alien creature's blood into a stone. So screw them. This is better.
Yeah.
But he does. He carries the stone down the flight of stairs to Yara. He finds in this sort of big cavernous room as well, and presents, as he said he would, this jewel heart, the heart of the elephant, to Yara. And there's a great moment when Yara sort of insults him and steps up to the stone, and then Conan sort of is like, "Oh, the guy's shrinking."
But it's like he's like, what's happening? I thought he was tall. Oh wait, no, what?
Yeah, I love them. Yeah, he's like, "Oh, and now he's the size of a child," and it's one of those. If you've ever watched any of like the Ray Harryhausen Sinbad
Oh,
films,
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I adore those films. They're sort of with all the stop motion. But I love this idea of him being so small at one point that the jewel he's as big as the jewel. He's
Hmm.
shrank down to the size of this jewel. And he climbs on it and stuff. And I was like, I can so picture this as like a
Oh, Ray
1960s sort of,
Harryhausen.
yeah,
Yeah,
Ray
yeah,
Harryhausen's
yeah.
kind of special effect. And I'm like, that's really cool. But instead of sort of, he's still, Yara is gesticulating with his arms and shouting, and Conan sort of stands by a little confused as to what the hell is going on. And then Yara is pulled into the stone, and he sees within the stone a figure with great wings and an elephant's head grab Yara, and that's it. Then really, we realize that Yara and Yag Kosha are now trapped in this stone, and Yag Kosha can take his revenge for as long as he likes, and that's the final enchantment. Um, and that's it. I mean, that's it. Conan sort of steps out, and he finds that all the guards have been killed, and that's what the gift that Yag Kosha has given him, a clear passageway out. Um, and it's he just sort of says basically the Sumerian turned and fled from the chamber down the silver stairs. So amazed was he that he did not occur to him to escape from the tower by the way he had entered it. Down that winding, shadowy silver he ran and came into a large chamber at the foot of the gleaming stairs. There he halted for an instant. He had come into the room of soldiers. He saw the glitter of their silver corselets and sheen of their jeweled sword hilts. So he's fully expecting a fight. He's like, he's like ready for it. They sat
And so are
slumped.
we.
Oh yeah, no, that's it. Like you're really going, oh come on, this is it now. And you're like, but you got 2 paragraphs left. They sat slumped at their banquet board, their dusky plumes wavering somberly above their drooping helmeted heads. They lay among their dice and fallen goblets on the wine-stained lapis lazuli floor, and he knew that they were dead. The promise had been made. That's it. That's all, and that's great. And he just sort of walks out, and it's like, cool. It's this weird adventure where he's sort of like, he went in, he met this guy who taught him about thievery, he met a cosmic being that he then killed, and he's taken out a famous sorcerer. Like it's like, and to Conan, it's like, yeah, that's a good night out.
Well, you know what? I think though, I don't think it is a good night out. I think it started as a good night and then it went sideways on him and he learned a lesson. He learned things. He learned from Taurus, but then he also learned, I think, a lesson about compassion from Yakosha, as well as how there are someone's personal testimony of evil in the world with Yara. You know, I think it's a step in how a young Conan learns about the world. Like he just thinks he's going to steal this gem. Okay, cool. But instead he gets confronted with aspects of the world he's not encountered before.
Oh yeah.
And I think it gives him, it shows how he can expand his view of the world and also kind of be ready for some of the weird shit that does happen to him eventually. Because eventually, you know, I mean, lots of weird shit happens. I mean, with Conan and stuff, you know, some terrible things. But this is one of those where he's like, oh, okay. But he can't make too much of it. He's got to just internalize what he can and learn his lesson so he can
move on to
another step forward.
Yeah.
Take another step forward. Yeah, I think that's the sense I got at the end. I didn't get a sense like he was like, hell yeah, what a night. I gotta like, I got the sense of, you know, that was kind of fucked up. That was kind of kind of a night. I didn't know that was gonna happen, but he took it. He's smart enough to take the lesson and understand there's a lesson there to be learned, as opposed to like, I screw that, you know.
You know, what you're saying is actually, you know, I was pretty off base, but you're right, because he comes out and it sort of says, he walks into the sort of the gardens and it's kind of like, you know, he basically enjoys it's a cool night air.
All of a sudden it's peaceful. It's like the evil guy's dead. There's nobody there to stop him, and it's peaceful to him. All of a sudden, all the tension and anxiety that's been throughout the whole night. All of a sudden, he's had that release of peace.
Well, he just said it, because he says he turned back and certainly he's walked into the garden. He turned back uncertainly to stare at the crypt tower he had left. Was he bewitched and enchanted? Had he dreamed all that he had seemed to have passed? As he looked, he saw the gleaming tower sway against the crimson dawn, its jewel-crusted rim sparkling in the glowing light, and crash into shining shards. So basically, the tower collapses because the magic's gone.
Right.
But there's that moment where he steps out, and you're exactly right, where he's like, "That was nuts. Did it happen? Did that happen?" And then the tower collapses, and he's like, "Yeah, that must have happened. That's weird." And I'm sure, hopefully, like it's not said, but I'm pretty sure he'd have grabbed some of the jewels that were bejeweling the tower and stuff. So hopefully he got something out of it. You know, I can't imagine he wouldn't.
Yeah, I must imagine it was a futile financial endeavor for him.
Yes, yeah.
There was no financial gain, but he gained something else.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned about that sort of the compassion. One of the things, and again, thinking back to the depression, it come a little bit later, but you have like the Dust Bowl, and you have people that were traveling all the time. People that, like you say, were desperate. Hobos became the thing during this period. People traveling the rails. One of the things is Conan comes in, and we sort of said about this before, that he's non-judgmental, and he listens to Yag Kosha's story. Yag Kosha's like, you know, I'm old, I'm blind, I'm trapped. Let me tell you my story as to how I came to be in this position. And it does start from a position of power, and it's a fall. It's over many thousands of years, but like it's a fall. And I think there's an acknowledgement there as well of like you're going to meet people in the world that are in a shitty position. People in a lesser position than you, but you don't know their story as to how they got there. Maybe it's worth listening and not judging other people because could be you at some other point, kind of thing. So, I do think Howard had something to say. You see, we keep saying like it's presented as lowbrow, but there's definitely a sense of what Howard was seeing in the world and how he was perceiving the world.
I think it's one of those things because because there is no intellectualizing about it, that it's visceral, even in
Good word. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
it's visceral, not just in a reactionary type of way, but in a or in a hard reactionary way, but Conan's own experience is that of feeling. You mentioned feeling earlier. It's all about feeling and sense, and what you can. It's not about thinking about things. It's about what you can touch and what you experience in between interactions with other people. And he goes on that intuition and feeling about somebody else when he meets them. What kind of character do they have? And it's all about that kind of thing. And I think that to me is a very grounded street level approach to life, as opposed to well, we're Christians, and so we have to do this, and we follow this, and we're Jews, and so we have the law to follow, and we do this, and we're Muslim, and so we pray 6 times facing this way because Allah and all that. And it's very different. It's very much, grounded in real world and like practical. What are the practical things in my life that I have to have in line? I have to make enough money to pay my bills, feed my family, and we face all those things today, but it's a little bit, we don't have these struggles, some of the same struggles, as far as not the Great Depression, or in this horribly violent and difficult world that Conan lives in. Our world is not nearly as brutal as it once was.
No,
but there are worlds that are brutal, that it's a lot more brutal to live in certain countries than it is to live in the Western world that we're used to, and we forget it sometimes. And we're all thinking about stuff on this high intellectual level, but Howard is giving us a character that doesn't have time for that.
no.
And I think Conan would probably tell you, he said he would probably say something like, I could think about that and all, but what good will it do me when I have to fight off this demon snake right now? I have to kill it so I can not die. That's much more important. And I don't quite frankly care how it even exists or that it exists. I stop it so it doesn't eat me and my friends right now. Thanks.
I like that. I like that as an answer. It's sort of like, there's two different types of people when confronted by an elephant-headed person. There's those that would stop and go, how has this come about? And then would question it. Or there's Conan, who's like, well, I'm going to listen, but like, I don't really care. Like, it doesn't help me in the way that you say, like, it doesn't help me on a day to day. I'm going to act in this moment, but like you say, it's not like I'm not going to then, as you said, intellectualize it and sort of like, it's, does it pay my bill? Does it keep me alive? Does it put food in my belly? Does it put a roof over my head? No. Oh, well.
And it might be that stoicism that Howard has for the character, and that approach might be hyperbolic even in the way it plays out, because certainly there are some things he's going to see that he would say, what the, you gotta be, but he doesn't. And it might be that hyperbolic approach to those kind of situations that drives home the core aspects of Conan's personality and character that people relate to. Sometimes you have to go overboard to make you make your point, and not in a farcical Jonathan Swift kind of way, but in a just take things to an extreme to make a point about how
Yeah.
Conan has to live and what he's trying to say about the world. And, people just maybe wouldn't have got that. And the intellectuals wouldn't have got that, as a
No.
because the intellectuals will be thinking, he's like, why should we worry about them? Why are we concerned? I don't know that the Dons of Oxford or their American equivalents would have worried too much about the poor, trying to survive on the Dust Bowl and the rails going across the country, just looking for, the next meal.
Exactly. Yeah. Roof over their head, food in their belly, whatever they could do. Yeah. No, I think this is it's a really interesting story because I was to say I'll finish with this final sort of thought is sort of I've read a couple of other Conan stories. And my expectation going into this was exactly that. As you described, like the action adventure kind of story. It starts in that way, and then becomes the pace slows and it comes to something different. And I really enjoyed that. That I was going, I was expecting this to be like he's going to climb the tower and fight this and do that, and it's like boom, bang, 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 bang. But for it to reach, and you said it's quite a talky sort of story. But in doing so, I think that what I like about this is it does present quite a lot of like more from Howard. It gives him a chance to breathe and to present sort of different ideas and some like these cosmic ideas, as well as something you can relate back to the context of the time. And so I just thought it was a fantastic story. It's a good choice. But I'm interested now to see it in that wider context of going, okay, well now I'm going to go and read these other stories of Conan, and I wouldn't mind that let's go read some Solomon Kane. I've only read one Solomon Kane story, so let's go read some more of them. Like, how is it? Does that fit in with that wider context? So my appetite is whetted for more Howard and more Conan.
Well, it got me thinking about the character Cull of Atlantis, another Howard character. And I thought I need to check him out now because he's supposed to be somewhat like Conan, but not exactly the same. Because that first Conan story was a reworked Cull story.
Oh,
The
okay.
Phoenix in the story that was originally a Cull story, and Thulsa Doom from the movie is actually a Cull antagonist who looks totally unlike James Earl Jones and is the antecedent for characters like Skeletor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's got a skull face and a hooded thing, like a Skeletor looks, and the Lich from D&D, those creatures. So yeah, it did the same thing for me. It was like, well, I want to read a Cull story. I knew Howard had created Cull, but I didn't know, that he was supposed to be Cull of Atlantis and in the same world as Conan. He's
But
supposed to be in the
earlier.
same, yeah, in that earlier time that we're talking about. He's supposed to be from that other time, that pre-Hyborian age, the other time when Atlantis, and all that. And that brings me to the surprise about the comic that I was telling you. If I can jump to that.
Go for it. Go, yeah.
So, I'll show you on the screen. I can send you a picture if you want to share it on social media anywhere. But if you look carefully, you can see that we get Yakosha in the story.
Oh man, that's awesome.
You see that?
Scan that
So,
in. If you can,
yeah, I'll send you some. I'll send you some pics. But so in this story, Conan also meets Cull. He actually has a time travel thing, and he's like, and once again, he's like, I don't understand why this is, but I'm just gonna go with it.
I don't understand why this is, but it is. So it's happening.
Right. So the interesting thing here is that he meets Yakosha in the past, the far past. But Conan's already met him. Okay, but what is his what does he say? It's a really neat thing he says. I can't remember, where is it? Let's not waste too much time. But anyways, what he says is, because my life is already entwined with yours and our future is the only reason I can see you here. And not everybody can see you in the past. So
wow.
It's got a weird sort of
so it ties into
but
what we're doing.
It ties it in exactly to this story because the footnote is Yakosha appeared in the Robert E. Howard, Conan story, the elephant and the
Wicked.
and the tower. It's like, oh, and here's the even more synchronicity bit about the whole moment is, I have been reading this Conan stuff, but I hadn't been reading it each month. I've been
Mm.
saving it up, and I just read this one this week, just before.
There you
I read
go.
this 4 issues where he appears this week, just before we were going to talk. So it all just kind of
Falls into
came
place.
together. Yes, it all just fell into place, and I was like, "That's creepy. That's one of those. That's synchronicity. That's what
Yeah,
that
man.
is." And I thought that's so weird, but it made everything more enjoyable, and it was just a much greater sort of impact with it. So with all that said, I do want to read more Conan stuff. I do want to find some Cull stories and check them out. And it just all kind of came together, and I was like, well, I gotta bring the comic to show
That's
you.
awesome. No, man, that's, yeah. Well, it's tempting. It's tempting me on the latest. I want to see, because you say it's up to, what issue are they up to now? They're up to issue. What issue?
13.
Oh, so the first
13.
couple of
This
volumes.
is
So the first volume of something must now be out
Yeah.
in trade. So there you go.
The first volume is already out in trade, and this would be, I guess, the third. I think they're only doing it in 4 issue arcs, which isn't a lot. But there was an ad in one of them, a house ad for one of the issues for the first volume.
I will have a
But
look straight to Amazon
but
after
check it
this.
out. Yeah, but check that out. This current one, the current issue is up to 13. That was issue 11 I showed you.
Okay.
So
I shall check that out.
I was a couple months behind, but yeah. And as we talked, I remembered one of the other things that first introduced me to Conan. I can't believe I forgot it. I probably the same Christmas I got Conan here, the Mego figure. Back then they had that it was like a comic book story, as well as a record that like had the audio for the comic, right? So there's a Fantastic Four, Captain America, some Spider-Man. When I was a kid, I had a 12-inch vinyl. It just had the stories, though it didn't have the comic. But you could also buy the 7-inch records with the comic. But I got a 12-inch Conan with just 4 stories, no comic. But so that was one of the other early intros to Conan. So I've listened to that different times during the years. Just on a long drive, I want something besides music, and I'll throw on
some Conan. That's
Conan
awesome.
or Spider-Man, all these old stories from the 70s that is just remind me of that time, but fun stuff.
The thing is, I think that's what it shows. These characters are timeless now. You can tap into them at any point, and I recommend people do. Like, you can go find out, either through the Kindle or ebook or on eBay or different ways. There are lots of different copies of trying to get these stories, and I do recommend them. And we'll be covering more. I mean, you're back for another one at some point. We'll be doing another one. You're going to be doing the God in the Bowl. We'll do that.
Yep.
At some point soon. So yeah. Anyway, we shall wrap up there. So before we do that,
I think as a final assessment is, even though we have intellectualized to an extent a story that maybe is about a character that isn't intellectual and wasn't maybe supposed to be as just good stories, just fun, escapist entertainment fantasy stories. There might be more to them, which drags you in some, but I think it's done in a way that you feel more than you think about. I think a lot of what we discussed was things that we felt first, and then we were able to put those feelings into thoughts. But I think a lot of the stuff is things we're feeling.
Yeah, I think the best word you used was visceral. This is it evokes something in me, which I really appreciate. I think you're right. They're just good stories, as you say, just good fun. You can read them just as an adventure and just enjoy it as such. Yeah. Anyway.
Exactly. I mean, and I've got a long history with reading old pulp stuff. So I mean,
I love pulps. I do love the pulp adventures. They're great stuff. Anyway, we will wrap up there. So Matt, where can people find you, and what are you doing?
what am I doing? Well, I'm almost done with the next episode of Classic Comics. It was an interview with an interview. It was a discussion with Spider Dan about Spider-Man. The last installment of my great Spider-Man dive that's been going on for the past few episodes. But I was putting together something really special with the music for the episodes, so it's just taken a little bit longer than I anticipated. So I won't spoil what it is, but it is something that I did myself. I didn't write it, but I did play all the instruments and such. So
Nice.
I had to put that together, and it's just that's a project that even if it's only a minute of music, it takes longer than you ever anticipate.
Oh, of course, yeah.
We're rolling on with Earth 2 in the Bronze Age. The next episode of that covers Showcase number 98, the second book of the 3-issue Power Girl. So her first solo story from 1978, I think it is 78. Power Girl is one of those favorite characters, along with the Helen Wayne Huntresses. And all the Earth 2 JSA Golden Age characters. It's always been my favorite corner of the DCU, so I'm always doing that. There's a book I'm supposed to be in, but the guy's gone silent. He had some issues over the summer and hasn't gotten back as far as needs, suggested what word I'm looking for, changes to the chapter. So I hope he's okay and everything's continues to progress. But and that is about Silver St. Cloud and the Batman comics. So
nice. That's
looking
good
forward
stuff,
to that
man.
coming out.
Yeah.
Yep. And then that's the only thing on the immediate horizon. But
Wonderful.
I'm always reading and writing reviews for DC Comics News and things like that.
Yeah, that's where to find it. Yeah, DC News. Yeah, go DC Comics News. Go find the reviews on there. Yeah, and you'll be back here. We will be talking about more Conan.
Yeah.
And,
Look forward to that, and hopefully you will get something in there for Tarzan eventually. Because
we definitely will. I've got some borrows around. You and I have sort of spoken about our affection for John Carter of Mars.
Oh yeah,
and so yeah, I'm all for reading some more Burroughs. So I'm definitely up for that at some point in the near future. But yeah, no, from 20th Century Geek point of view, we have just finished, in the last episode, we've just finished our Beverly Hills Cop retrospective with Jack. And we're going to be looking at the future, and we've just now kicked off a Conan kind of deep dive, which I'm really looking forward to doing more of. But we have a little bit of an interlude on the next episode, where I am joined by my brother from another mother, Julian Darius from Stories Out of Time and Space, and no one other than Tony Farina, to talk about a much underappreciated film. We're going to be discussing Hudson Hawk. Three guys that love an underappreciated 1990s Bruce Willis movie. So lots of gushing over that, I think, in the next episode. Very much looking forward to that.
I because you mentioned Julian and Tony, it reminded me of the other thing that's coming out soon, and that's the comic that Tony and I have been working on. That Julian is publishing.
Contributing. Yes, he said, he mentioned it to me. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't how I forgot about that. I don't know. Probably because it's been so long since I actually physically touched any of the work for it that I'm not thinking about it. But it's all in his hand, Julian's hands, and it's at that stage. So there's that. Whenever that comes out,
he actually he mentioned it the other day. Actually, he on Sunday. He mentioned that's very exciting. Yes, so there is that coming as well. So yeah, big things coming for us. Yeah, right. We should wrap it there. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Matt. That's been a great discussion. So I've really enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next episode. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening and your support. And we shall see you on the next episode.